Bi'sat, where the Prophet migrated, till the demise of the Prophet. And we looked at like 26 battles he fought, and few battles we kind of touched, and some of the narratives or narrations that are there, and his role and what role he played, and how Prophet basically introduced him to the Ummah. And eventually that great event of Ghadir, which was the announcement and declaration of the successorship of the Khilafat of Hazrat Amir, which was declared. And then at the time of death, right after death, you have the time where the Imam was in patience. He till the Khilafat, that's 25 odd years that he was there, and why it was that he took that route. Now, when we reflect in the words of Imam Ali alayhi salam, why did he choose to be patient rather than, standing up for his right? The Khilafat was usurped. Why he didn't do that? We briefly kind of pointed out too, but first and foremost is that where, in the letter that he mentions in Najul Balagha, that when he was going to a battle to Basra to fight those who break the pledge, the Talha and Zubair, in which he mentions this: when God took the soul of his prophet, the Quraysh, through their self-interest, nominated themselves over us, even though we were most worthy of rule. They usurped our rights. I saw that patience and toleration is better than creating division amongst the Muslims and the spilling of their blood. The Muslim community, due to their newness of their faith, was much like a large leather container that was brimming over with milk. The least slack and irresolution would spoil it, and the least movement would spill it. Just now, there was a group of people who accepted Islam, and then they went back to idol worship right after the demise. And they pose a threat to the community in Medina with war. So imagine that this is the state of the Muslims, and then now Imam Ali says, okay, I want to. Because for Imam Ali alayhi salam, as for any great leader, the ends are more important. The goal is more important, not the qudrat and not the power. And even I'll read you some of the narrations where Imam also mentions what happened after, just before he took his khilafat. He clearly says that rulership, leadership, leading the community, is not even worse than the sneeze of a goat. That's for him, right? All he wants is that, it's at a time where Islam have reached to its peak. The Quran is finished now, right? There's no more revelations now. But there are Christians and Jews and other people coming to Medina to ask about Islam. Who is there to answer? If Imam Ali is engaged and indulged in this war, internal civil war, for the sake of power, although it's been usurped, he clearly mentions it in all his khutbahs and sermons and letters, right? And later on, people still finding out, still now people are finding out, and at that time also people understood that yes, the Khilafat really belonged to Ali, right? So people, Christians, Jews and other faiths, they were becoming idol worshippers. They wanted to know about Quran. Abdullah ibn Abbas, who is considered to be the first mufassir of the Quran, when you ask him who was your teacher, it was no one but Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ali ibn Abi Talib was the teacher of Abdullah ibn Abbas in tafsir of Quran, right? So he maintained that silence. He preferred that silence at this juncture in order for the preaching of Islam, in order for the protection of Islam. Like, as you also know that, there were a group of prophets who claimed themselves to be prophet, such as their names in the history been mentioned as Musaylame, Tulahiya, and Saja. These are the three people who claim that we are the prophet after the prophet. And they mobilize army to really fight against Muslims. Now, if there be already an internal war amongst Muslims, with Imam Ali and some of the companions who believe that, Imam Ali is the one who his khilafat is usurped, if they are also killed, Salman is killed, Ammar is killed, Bilal is killed, Abu Zar is killed, what will happen, right? And these individuals, the companions who believed in Imam Ali alayhi salam, they become the source of teachings of true Islam, right? So Imam Ali alayhi salam, preferred that. In another, Imam Ali alayhi salam emphasizes, this is in the letter 62. When the Holy Prophet passed away, the Muslims started a tug of war for the Khilafat. I swear by Allah that at that juncture, I could not have even imagined that the Arabs would snatch the seat of the Khilafat from the family and the descendants of the Holy Prophet, and that they would be swearing the oath of allegiance for the Khilafat to a different person. At every stage, I kept myself aloof from the struggle of supremacy and power politics until I found the heretics had openly taken to heresy and schemism and were trying to undermine and ruin the religion preached by our Holy Prophet. I felt afraid that after seeing and recognizing the evil, if I did not stand up to help Islam and the Muslims, it would be a worse calamity to me than my losing authority and power over you, which was only a transient and short-lived affair. Therefore, when I stood up amidst the sweeping surge of innovations and schemism, the dark clouds of heresy dispersed, falsehood and schism were crushed, and the religion was saved. This is in the letter number 62 of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Yeah. So he made very clear, in Khutbah Shakhshakhiya is the same thing, in letters the same way, in his actions the same way, but at the same time, he preferred the unity of the community. And we, being the followers of the Imam, we should also, train ourselves in such a fashion that we should accommodate, other people, other people who have different type of belief within Islam as well in regards to the Khilafat. Not only that, if you look at, to other religions as well, the way how Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he met the Persians or the Christians or the Jews, right, or even non-believers as well, So that's something that we need to follow, Now, what was his sort of behavior? Number one, he was extremely busy in acts of servitude, where Imam Sajjad alayhi salam says that, who was known to be the Sayyidus Sajidin, that my worship is not close to my grandfather worship. That's how Imam Ali was during this time. The other was tafsir of Quran. The other was attending to the questions, answering to the people in need in regards to fiqh and ahkam. It was Imam Ali who was, and many of the caliphs themselves, they have clearly mentioned that if it wasn't for Ali, we would have been doomed, we would have been killed. He is the reference point. People would go to him, for that. Apart from that, he also advised on political side of it. People would go to him to ask that what is preferable, what to do, for example. The consultation that he would provide. For example, there's this, the Battle of Qadisiyah. In this, during the second Khalifa era, this is at the time, one of the examples that is given, during the 14th Hijrah, a hard battle ensured between Muslims and the Persians in the land called Qadisiyah. This was the battle in which the Muslims were victorious, and Rustum Farooq Zad, the top commander of the Persian forces, was killed. With this victory, the whole of Iraq came under the political and military authority of the Muslims. Madain, the seat of Sasaniya Persian Empire, also taken over by the Muslims, and the Persian forces were forced to retreat into the interior of the country. Once they retreated, they mobilized again, right? About 150,000 soldiers. Yazdegerd was the king at that time. 150,000 soldiers. They all gathered, and they were ordered to put a stop to a sudden attack by Muslims. So they were there. Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas was one of the companions, sends a letter to the second Khalifa saying that the army in Kufa is ready to begin a battle, and we are prepared to really attack. So why don't you come and join us, and we'll attack them. But they came to Imam Ali for advice. Here, Amirul Momineen stood up and he said that in this matter, victory or defeat is not dependent on smallness and greatness of forces. It is Allah's religion, which He has raised above all faiths, and His army, which He has mobilized and extended until it has reached the point where it stands now. We hold a promise from Allah, and He will fulfill His promise and support His army. So it was not by numbers, because He has seen all and all. It is Allah's religion. Allah is the protector of it. And then, on the other hand, He also advises the Khalifa that it's not safe for you to go and fight, because it is the honor of Muslims that if the Khalifa being killed in the war, the Muslims will lose the morale, will lose the hope. Although they have usurped the property, but still in terms of giving advice, he's very fair. Because his calculation is not this person's animosity or that person's animosity. His calculation is that position of Khilafat. And that is Islam. If anything happens to that, that means that there's a weakening of the Islamic sort of nation as such. So therefore he advises him not to, right? So we find that eventually, this is what happened. The Persians were defeated in this battle, right? And the life of the second Khalifa was also saved as well, because if he would have gone, he would have been killed, right? Right. So, if you look at it, the schemism or the methodology or the mannerism of Hazrat Amir was this. He was a man of God, right? And unfortunately, one of the proofs that we could find that the Bible being changed is that they say that David, right, just in the margin, just to let you know that, the authenticity and who are the men of God really, in our eyes, the prophets and awliya and the imams, who they are. They say that David liked a soldier's wife, and then he wanted to, have his wife, so he sent this soldier in the battle so that he gets killed, so that he can marry his wife, right? So this is their imagination, understanding of who, a prophet is. But when we look at our teachings, we say, no, all the Anbiya are Masoom. All prophets are Masoom. And where do we learn this from? From Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, right? From their behavior, what they have taught to us. Salat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Very briefly, in regards to the swearing of the allegiance, so one after the other, right? We find that, how this, after the second, there was another committee which they sat together in order to, select, because two of them were not there, but they selected the third one. And when they selected the third one, Imam Ali once again reminded them that, I was more rightful for this, but I'm not going to get involved in this, right? Then you have the third one, how he was killed by the Muslims, the corruption that was taking place amongst the Muslim lands at that time when the third Khalifa was in power. Marwan, who was exiled by the Prophet outside forever, the Khalifa gave him the respite and brought him back. Not only brought him back, but even gave him a very high position in the ministry, right? It is something that Prophet have done, this person have acted against the Prophet, right? And the Muslims were complaining of the corruption that was going on at that time. Abu Zar, who was the closest companion for which the Prophet have said, the earth haven't seen a truthful person like him, was exiled outside Medina, and he died outside in the wilderness with hunger and thirst, the most closest companion to the Prophet. When it happened in the governance of the third one. Is this something right and correct happened? Logic doesn't say that, right? Right. But in order for the unity and respect, we have that. We regard from a historical point of view, yes, first Khalifa, third Khalifa, second and third, they were the Khalifas. Yes, we do say that, right? So in any case, there was the Islam and the political system was crumbling, right? And like for example, the governors, they were doing whatever they want, such as leading prayers while drinking alcohol, right? Leading prayers on a different date instead of Jummah, for instance, even expressing that. So the political situation was bad to the extent that they wanted to kill the Khalifa. And when they wanted to kill the Khalifa, who was there to protect the life of the third one? It was Hassan and Hussein who were sent to the house of the third Khalifa to protect and guard the house of the Khalifa. Hassan and Hussein was sent, right? So this clearly shows that his methodology, the way he, treated the three Khalifas and how he helped the Muslims, because many Muslims were completely unaware of Imam Ali alayhi salam as such. When he was killed on the 19th in Sham, in Syria, they were Muslims, right? And who was the governor? It was Muawiyah. Who appointed him? It was the second Khalifa who appointed him, right? And he, claimed his own sort of government independently as such, although under the Khilafat, but he has his own sort of way of dealing with things. He did his own ijtihad, and he had, what you call scholars and mujtahideen who would extract rules and laws based on the Quran, and he would follow that, right? So now, the time where Imam was martyred in the Haram, in the Masjid, Muslims in Syria, they would say, what was Ali doing in Masjid? The amount of propagation against Imam Ali was like this, right? There was a huge community who were, dead against the Imam Ali alayhi salam. But today we find, because of this patience, because of the teachings of the Imam, you find every Muslim scholar, they have nothing but good to say about Hassan and Hussein, about Ahl Bayt, and about Imam Ali alayhi salam, right? This is because of the patience of the Imams and Masumeen alayhi salam, that they continuously support the Muslims, right? So now, the third, after the death of the third one, this is how they pledged to Imam Ali. They all came. Out of all of these three Khalifas, there was not a unanimously elected and loved by the people to become the Khalifa. It was no one but it was Imam Ali alayhi salam, right? This is how he says, that if you help me with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This is in Nahjul Balagha in sermon number 54, where he says that they leapt upon me as the camels leap upon each other on their arrival to drinking water, when they have been let loose from their chains. That's how they came to me. This continued until I thought they would either kill me or kill one another in front of me. I thought over the ins and outs of this matter to the extent that it prevented me from sleeping. This is how they were forcing and asking Imam Ali alayhi salam. In another, in sermon number 229 of Nahjul Balagha, Imam Ali says this: you were dragging my hand towards you to swear the oath of allegiance, but I was withdrawing it. This struggle continued until you gathered around me in such numbers and in such a way as if you were thirsty camels, and as if I was the only spring of water. In your eagerness, you almost crushed me. You were pushing and dragging each other to reach me until the laces of my shoes were broken. The cloak fell off my shoulders, and old and weak individuals were crushed. You were so overjoyed on that occasion that even young children came out toddling and running and joyfully jumping. Old people were falling down and dragging themselves to reach my feet. The ill and sick came to me staggering and creeping, and even young girls came out of their houses running towards me to show their veneration and respect. Can you deny these facts? This is how, he was asked to lead. This is how they kind of forced him. In another sermon, after his death, the people flocked around me, imploring me to take up the Khilafat. They gathered in such number and were so anxious to show their sincerity that both of my sons, Hassan and Hussein, were almost trampled, and my dress was torn. They were falling upon me to accept the position of leadership. I would have turned down their request, but I was afraid that with my refusal, they would completely lose touch of the truth and the religion. But when I accepted their rulership and made them follow the path of God, they revolted. All of the three groups behaved as if they have never heard the Quran saying, heaven is meant for those who do not covet, do not create mischief, and do not oppress human beings. The eternal peace and happiness is for those who lead a pious and holy life. I swear by God that they were made to hear these words of God repeatedly, and their meaning was explained to them completely and fully. However, the vicious ways of ungodly life fascinated them, and its luxuries, its pomp and glory, as well as its power and wealth, enchanted them. I swear by the Creator of this universe that had they not sworn unconditional allegiance to me, had they not manifested undoubted thankfulness in my accepting their rulership, had not the presence of helpers and supporters made it incumbent upon me to defeat the faith, and had not God Almighty taken a promise from the learned scholars to put a check upon the luxurious and vicious lives of oppressors and tyrants, as well as to try to reduce the pangs of poverty and starvation of the oppressed and downtrodden, I would even now have left the rulership of this state and would have allowed it to sink into the anarchy and chaos as I did during the early days. The pomp and glory of vicious life is worthless to me than even the sneeze of a goat. Right? So it was, this type of election was never seen in the history of Islam. Right? We know how the first came into power. We know how the second came into power. And we know how the third. But this was the only imam, this was the only leader who was selected in this fashion. So right after this, there was 4 or odd years, not much, 4 years or something, where we find that there was the battle of Nakithin, basically the Tala and Zubair, right? And how respectfully, the wife, the Momineen, was returned back to Medina. That obviously, there are certain human elements that we have to consider, right? Women, jealousy, all of these things we are also limited in many things. We say that we are the lovers and so on and so forth, but when the time will come, Allah knows the best, right? We don't know, right? The 6th Imam had a story, which I don't have much time, 45, right? 40, yeah. So I have 10 minutes. So in a story, there was Mufazzal, who was the companion of the 6th Imam. And he would always have friends who used to play with pigeons, kabutarbaz, they used to call him, like people who are not well respected, And there were scholars there as well. So they complained to the sixth Imam that your companion is always in the company of the, these corrupt, rowdy and people who play with pigeons and roosters and all that. He's always in their company. The scholars complaining to the sixth Imam. The sixth Imam said, okay, is that the case? Okay, let me write a letter. And then he writes a letter to these people who are complaining, and he said that go give this to Mufazzal and ask him to read this in public. They say, oh, now the friend said that definitely there's something about Mufazzal in this letter that Imam is going to tell him off, right? So they took the letter and they gave to Mufazzal, and he said, you have to read it in public. So Mufazzal said, okay, fine. Mufazzal was a great companion. There's a book called Tawheed-e-Mufazzal, which is on Tawheed. This is actually the sixth Imam dictating him about Tawheed. It's been translated in English. It's on Islam.org as well. You can go through that. And that book also has a story, which I'll mention later on. So here, Mufazzal says, read it in public. So he opens the letter and he reads in public. And it says, that Imam is in need of some financial aid, help. He announced it to everybody. He's in need of openly. And all of these scholars who are saying, Mufazzal plays with people who plays with pigeons and all these rowdy and, people, he's not in good company and so on and so forth. So Mufazzal read it. All of these people, they just put their head down. And before, apparently it's like this, that he read in public in the masjid or somewhere, and then he left outside. All of these people who used to play with pigeons and all of these, the people thought them to be rowdy and not good people, they collected money and they gave it to Mufazzal, right? They came to the aid of the Imam rather than those who were like scholars, and people may thought that they are the ulama and all that, but there was those people who helped the Imam, right? So it's actually that heart, right? It's not with the zahiri face, right? So in any case, right, what we find here as well is that Salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So people have limitations, different ways, and we have to acknowledge these limitations. And we have to be within the boundaries of respecting each other. Aisha was the wife of the Prophet and must be respected. All of the maraji and ulama have given fatwa that we cannot disrespect in a negative connotation or in any way possible against the wife of the Prophet. So how did Imam Ali respect it, although she was there? Imam Ali sent her with an army who wore the niqab. They were wearing armor, and their clothes, they kind of veiled themselves. And then she was in the camel, covered with parda and everything, right? And she reaches Medina. And when she reaches Medina, or while she was reaching Medina, she complained, look at Ali. He has sent me with na mahram. And then when these soldiers reached Medina and they unveiled themselves, they were all women. And they unveiled themselves, they were no one but women. So the women were accompanied by the wife of the Prophet with respect, and it was sent there, right? So that aspect of respect from the Ahl Bayt alayhi salam, we have seen it, and we have to, hold that, in honor. And any sort of disrespect should not be allowed and entertained. All of our maraji have mentioned that, right? Peculiarly and particularly to the wives of the Prophet. Yes, there are limitations that we know that. And, it's like, for example, imagine, no matter how corrupt, for example, one's mother is, but still one does not allow to, even from an Islamic perspective, disrespect, right? Disrespect is not allowed. Yes, you may not listen if she is a mushrika. You may not listen to her, but not disrespecting her. Now we are talking about the wife of the Prophet. So we got to be a bit careful over there, right? So here, the battle of Naqisin, you have Tala and Zubair, which happened. Then you have the battle of Qasitin, which is ended up with arbitration, and Imam was left with no choice over there as well. The battle concluded without, they did not sided with Imam Ali alayhi salam, how they cheated, Imam Ali alayhi salam in that is very clear. And then the battle of Mariqin, where in Nahrawan, where the, the Khawarij were basically, kicked out of Islam. Only few remained, and one of them was Ibn Muljim. And it was not the way of Imam Ali alayhi salam to run behind and kill someone. These people who ran away, Imam Ali alayhi salam did not run behind them to kill them. It was against the etiquettes of the Imam. And they themselves, one of them was Ibn Muljim, who came back and did what he did. The pains of Imam Ali alayhi salam is enormous. There is no limit of the heart rendering and the cries and the sorrows of Imam Ali alayhi salam. It wasn't easy for Imam Ali alayhi salam to see Fatima in that state at all. It wasn't easy for Imam Ali. They say, Allama Amini have brought this riwayat. It's very difficult to even recite that. That the greatest Mazloom is the one who could see his wife being disrespected and cannot do anything. Because in those riwayat, you even have that Siddiqa Kubra was beaten. The daughter of the Prophet was. It's very, I don't know how we are listening and how I am reciting even. Imagine that. And Imam Ali, who is the first individual of Islamic Ummah, kept quiet. He was patient. And the whole incident of burning of the door and how Imam Ali alayhi salam buried his young wife. She was 18 years old. And what was he saying while burying? He says, "Oh Rasulullah, ask what sort of zulm, what sort of oppression, what sort of pain that Fatima have seen from the Ummah. Ask. Oh Rasulullah, when you gave Fatima to me, Fatima was in one piece. But when I am returning, Fatima is not in one piece. Her ribs are broken." Wahid Khurasani says that, when a finger of a person breaks and he tries to move the finger, how painful it is. Imagine breathing of Fatima. Every breath she takes with those broken ribs, how she was feeling, what she was feeling. So painful. And she carried herself that way for 90 odd days, 75 days, according to whatever that riwayat may be. And look at her wasiyah. What is she saying? "Oh Ali, bury me at night. Oh Ali, shroud me. Oh Ali, recite Quran after burying me, because I love Quran." How far are we from Quran? How much of Quran do we recite? Yes, we cry, we break, our hearts are broken for Siddiqa Kubra, for Fatima to Zahra. But in terms of our action, we have to give oath to ourselves. We have to tell to ourselves, "Ya Fatima to Zahra, I will recite one page of Quran every day for you. Oh Ali, recite Quran on my grave." And when Ali buries, and then Ali looks at the heaven, it is in Nahjul Balagh, he says that the days for me will be like these dark nights, oh Fatima, after you. That's how it was for Ali. And then when Ali is about to leave, he calls Hussein and he whispers something in the ears of Hussein. And when Fatima was leaving, Fatima calls Zainab and whispers something in the ear of Zainab. And the secret was disclosed or unclosed on the day of Ashura. Because they asked Zainab all the time, "What did Fatima told you peculiarly when she was leaving this dunya?" We want to know. She will never say that. What Ali was saying to Hussein when he was leaving the dunya, Hussein would never say that. But on the day of Ashura, when Fatima asked Hussein, "Hussein, move forward. Before my mother died, she asked to kiss the neck of Hussein." And then here Hussein says, "Oh Fatima, move forward and move your rida, move your abba from the shoulder." from your arms, because our father, before he died, he asked me to kiss your arms because robes will be tied after my martyrdom. Allah lanatullah ala qawm al-zalimin sayalamu alladhina zalamu ayya munqalibin yanqalibun. Ya Ali, Matam Hussein, Ya Hussein.